Hi everyone, thank you to be here once again. I don't know if you watched it or if you remember, but one of my last videos was dedicated to the ZX81 from Sinclair, this small revolutionary computer. And in this video I promise that I will make another video to show you the best games available for the ZX81. So there we are, and today I'm gonna show you my 20 preferred video games for the ZX81, but exclusively released in the 80s, because I don't know if you're aware, but every month, even today, new games for the ZX81 are released. It's crazy. These games are called homebrews, and I will make another video of my 20 preferred homebrew games for the ZX81, that is to say, modern games released after 2000. But for today, let's focus on my preferred 20 best games for the ZX81. The selection has been very difficult to make for me because there are so many games I would like to show you, but I had to select a few and to leave others behind. Well, enough said, let's have a look at these 20 best games in my opinion for the ZX81 released in the 80s. Sea War is a little obscure game about which it's practically impossible to obtain any information. We only know that it was published by the English company Panda Software alongside the ZX Spectrum version in 1982. Aboard your high-tech submarine, you must destroy the numerous enemies that come your way in the underwater depths. You can shoot horizontally to destroy them, but also vertically to attack them from below, or sink the boats that launch torpedoes at you from the surface. The action is frenetic, with many objects quickly moving on the screen. This modest little action game is nevertheless an excellent way to test your reflexes. Mr. Munchee is a Pac-Man clone programmed by Canadian Greg Brooks in 1983. He didn't stop there and released other excellent games for the ZX81, which we will see later. Of course, there are a lot of Pac-Man clones on the ZX81, but most of the time they limit themselves to the machine's constraints and don't offer moving objects larger than a character. In Mr. Munchee, though, a real effort has been made and the Pac-Man and Ghost sprites are of a substantial size, adding to the excitement of the game. Mr. Munchee offers all the ingredients of a good Pac-Man game, including continuous player movement and 3 different mazes. City of Xon is a game developed by the American company Pleasantries for the Timex Sinclair 1000. It's the only known game from this publisher, but what a game, wow! The story can be summed up in a few words. Aboard your ship you must locate and capture the evil tyrant Xon from his lair located deep in the valley. You fly over the various facilities of the city of Xon, trying to destroy as many as possible while avoiding getting hit yourself. As you can see, the game is above all a tour de force to show that, yes, making an isometric 3D game like Zaxxon is possible on the ZX81. So in practice, the game is quite complicated because in addition to moving your ship, you have to manage 5 other keys that are used to activate the shields to protect yourself from the enemy weapons, activate the grappling hook to retrieve fuel containers or capture Xon, fire the phaser or disruptor depending on the target encountered, And finally, another key is used to trade 300 score points for fuel. Yes, it's pretty unplayable, but City of Xon is a true technical and graphical demonstration worth testing. Published by PSS, this game was initially called Maze Drag Racer, before being later renamed Maze Death Racer, at least on the cassette inlay, which was probably more attractive. The game is, in any case, a good adaptation of the arcade game Rally X, released in 1980. The pitch is simple. Trapped in a maze, you must use your car to collect all the bonuses scattered here and there. Of course, all this would be easy if several other cars were not chasing you all the time to kill you. On top of that, obstacles are placed along the road that you must avoid at all costs or risk wrecking your car. Of course, compared to the arcade version, it lacks the radar map or the ability to leave smoke behind to slow down enemies, but adapting the game to the ZX81 with this cool multi-directional scrolling is already quite an achievement. And another software farm game with Z-Xtricator, their third high-resolution title. This English publisher has clearly been very prolific, producing many of the best games for the ZX81. This time, you're in command of a Z-Xtricator spaceship and you must rescue your compatriot scattered on the surface of a hostile planet. But the inhabitants of this world won't let you, and you'll have to destroy most of their ships to gain some time in order to recover the survivors. This task isn't easy, as the planet's gravity is so strong that you can only get close to the ground for a few seconds before exploding. You must therefore act quickly and precisely to pull the survivors into your ship. Z-Xtricator is, of course, a simplified version of the arcade game Defender, but with effective gameplay and polished graphics. "3D Defender" is an impressive game written by G.K. Gray in 1981, the first year the ZX81 was released. The programmer hit hard that year with this game and 3D Monster Maze. In 3D Defender, you are the sole surviving pilot of Earth's space fleet. Thus, everyone is counting on you to defend Earth from alien invasion. Aboard your ship, you fly over an 80s-style grid and you must spot enemy ships, align them in your crosshair, and shoot them down before they hit you or land on our beloved planet. Easier said than done, as the game is very fast-paced and it's difficult to find and track enemies. 3D Defender is truly an impressive game with its animated 3D grid and big enemy ships. Bravo, G.K. Gray. QS Scramble is another clone of the arcade game Scramble, like many others released on the ZX81. However, I included Quicksilver's version because it's interesting on several levels. First of all, the game itself is well made, with all the elements that made the arcade game a success. But above all, it's a good example of games that took advantage of the many expansion boards available for the ZX81. Quicksilver was not only a game publisher, but also a manufacturer of such expansion boards. And QS Scramble takes advantage of both their user character generator card and their sound card based on a General Instrument AY38910 chip. The result is a very enjoyable game offering fine graphics and sound effects, a fairly rare combination on the ZX81 in the 80s. City Patrol is a first-person shooter published by Macronix in 1982. Aboard your mobile laser cannon, you must defend your city against an alien invasion. Enemy ships appear at the top of the screen and descend diagonally to the city ground. Along the way, they may pause to arm their lasers and destroy your buildings. This is when they are the most vulnerable and easiest to align with your crosshairs. But be careful, when shooting you can also destroy your own buildings, which costs you points and is especially bad for the people who live in there. City Patrol is a very impressive game for the ZX81, with its 4 building lines scrolling in parallax at different speeds. Of course, there are several adaptations of Donkey Kong on the ZX81, but most of the time the graphics consist of simple characters moving on the screen, requiring a lot of imagination from the player to imagine a Mario who must save his princess. In Crazy Kong, programmed by the German Christoph Sueschke, a real effort has been made graphically, with the main character being 3 characters tall and well animated. Gameplay-wise, the game is very enjoyable and differs from Donkey Kong in several ways. The levels are stretched out in height and are revealed little by little thanks to the vertical scrolling as the player climbs the floors. Of course, you will have to jump over barrels, but you can also collect power-ups, take elevators, or use hammers, all within a time limit. A very nice game. '49er is the first high-resolution game from Software Farm, which will later release several others. High resolution, yes, you heard correctly. No special expansions, just on a standard ZX81 equipped with 16K RAM. '49er certainly looks like Dig Dug, but it brings its share of originality. You control a miner who must retrieve gold nuggets by digging the ground. One small problem though, giant rats are constantly trying to eat you. Fortunately, you can kill them by releasing snakes from their nests. They will kill everything they encounter on their way back to the surface. Also, watch out for the gremlin at the top of the screen, who tries to destroy the pile of earth blocking the mine entrance. Hopefully, you can return to the surface from time to time to add more earth to the pile. Once all the nuggets have been collected, a door appears to move on to the next mine. Clearly one of the best games for the ZX81. Several versions of Frogger exist on the ZX81, but the official version is the best one. It was developed by Consoft for the Timex Sinclair 1000 under license from Sega, itself the official distributor of Konami's game for North America. As with the TRS-80, the graphic limitation of the ZX81 led the developers to split the game in 2 parts. The frog must first cross the road without being crushed by vehicles, before the second part appears, taking place on the river. There the frog must reach the other bank by jumping on logs and on backs of turtles. All the details of the arcade version are present, with snakes, crocodiles, flies and other frogs. Only the music is not there, due to the structural mutism of the ZX81. This version of Frogger for the ZX81 is really well done and demonstrates that very early on, the small computer had good adaptations of arcade hits. The Gauntlet is an adaptation of Konami's Scramble arcade game, released in 1981, a year before this ZX81 version. Scramble inspired many versions on this machine, but the Gauntlet is definitely the best one. Aboard your Gauntlet ship, you must break through the Microxian's defenses to reach the final boss at the bottom of the cave and destroy him. All the details of the arcade games are present, with each phase of the cave, right down to the narrow maze that leads to your final target. You also have to keep an eye on your fuel and regularly refuel by bombing the tanks on the ground. In short, the Gauntlet is an excellent adaptation of Scramble, with its large sprites, horizontal scrolling, and graphics that makes the most of the ZX81's predefined characters. Cosmic Cockerel strikes again with Rocketman, a high-resolution game for the ZX81 that requires no special expansion aside from 16K of RAM. In Rocketman you must collect diamonds located on the left side of the screen. The only problem is that there is a huge gap between you and the diamonds. You need to get a jetpack and first of all fill its tank with enough fuel to cross the gap. This wouldn't be too complicated if a giant bubble wasn't constantly chasing you, dragging you down into the shark-infested waters. Note that at higher levels, the jetpack is replaced by a vulture and the fuel cans by lamb legs. Rocketman is a must-have in the ZX81's game library. Wrath of Kong is a Canadian game released in 1983 for the Timex Sinclair 1000. Of course, there are many Donkey Kong adaptations for the ZX81, but this version is undoubtedly the best, with its 4 stages, well-tuned difficulty, and graphic animation that go beyond simple characters display. You know the pitch, the beautiful Jane has been kidnapped by the terrible Kong, and it's up to you to climb the floors and jump over barrels to save the beautiful girl. The 4 stages aren't those of the official version of Donkey Kong, but variations of the first stage with additional obstacles. Booster is a sequel to the excellent Rocketman, released 1 year before. Like all Cosmic Cockerel games, Booster offers high-resolution graphics without any hardware modifications on the ZX81. Very delighted to see Rocketman again, who this time must retrieve fuel cells that appear on the right wall, then bring them back to his spaceship located on the left on a random floor. Of course, there are multiple ways to die. First, by hitting one of the enemies located on the floors, but it's also complicated to maneuver in the air with your jetpack, and if you don't land properly on the platforms, you'll crash and die. Your oxygen level is also limited, meaning you have to hurry before you run out and die of asphyxiation. Rock Crush is a game developed by Stephen McDonald in 1985, featuring high-resolution graphics. The goal is to collect all the diamonds in a level without being crushed by the rocks that fall if you dig underneath. While the game is obviously very similar to Boulder Dash, the gameplay is actually a little different. Because the entire level is displayed on the screen and the space is limited, it's more of a puzzle game than an action game. Each miner's move must be carefully considered. Otherwise, you'll be stuck and have to restart the level. It's funny to note that the developer released a new version of Rock Crush in 2020 for the game's 35th anniversary, and even a sequel, Rock Crush 2, in 2022. Boucin Bert, published by Software Farm in 1985, is a little-known yet excellent ZX81 game. It's a platformer where you have to collect a certain number of keys before you can exit the level. Well, that is, if you manage to find the exit door. Of course, you have to jump from platform to platform while avoiding the various enemies and poisonous plants that will complicate your task. While the concept seems classic, the execution is just fantastic. The sprites are enormous, and as a result, you only see a small part of each level. The rest is revealed to you as you progress via an excellent multi-directional scrolling. Frankly, this is one of the best games available on the ZX81. Go and play it, please. 3D Monster Maze is undoubtedly the ZX81's most iconic game. Programmed by Malcolm Evans, then aged 37, 3D Monster Maze is a precursor to survival horror FPS games. Released the same year as the ZX81, the game immediately made an impression as an exceptional game, as the ZX81's games were rather basic in its first year of release. Caught in a maze, you must find the exit while preventing the T-Rex from finding and eating you. Messages informing you about the T-Rex behavior increase the stress and add to the game's atmosphere. The 3D display of the maze is well done despite the computer's limitations, and above all, the display is fast thanks to the game's programming in machine language. But the Mazogs is the other iconic ZX81 game, programmed by Don Priestley and published by Boucin Bert in 1982. It was the game that took the ZX81 into a new gaming dimension. Gone were the days of the predefined characters dueling on screen. This was truly an ambitious game with large on-screen sprites moving through a vast maze. You control a warrior who must find a treasure hidden deep into the dungeons, populated by fearsome monsters called Mazogs. If you fight them without a sword, you have a 50-50 chance of dying. If you find a sword, then you're sure to win, but it will immediately disintegrate due to the Mazog's acidic blood. You have to find another one along the way. To find the treasure, you can ask the warrior who died before you for directions and whose souls are trapped into the walls. But hurry, because their clues disappear after a few seconds only. If you finally find the treasure, you will have to go back the way you came, avoiding the Mazogs as much as possible to find the exit. Wow! Mazogs is simply an incredible game for its time, offering a new adventure with each game. This was a dream come true for any Dungeons & Dragons fans. Finally, here's probably my favorite game for the ZX81, and it has an incredible story. Busca Dos Tesouros is a Brazilian game, which may translate as In Search for Treasures in English. The author is Tadeu Coringa da Silva, who was only 15 years old when he developed this incredible game in 1986. The game is heavily inspired by Pitfall but pushes the concept further with 313 levels and 15 different enemies, all this in only 16 kilobytes. It's the ultimate platform game for the ZX81. The game was originally available through mail order in the Brazilian magazine Microsistemas, either as a tape or as a program listing to type yourself. But the game almost disappeared forever, and it was only because some Brazilian collectors remembered playing this incredible game in the 80s that a copy was finally found in 2002 and archived for everyone's enjoyment. In 2006, the game's creator was also found and duly celebrated. He notably gave his permission for the free distribution of his game on internet. This story is now part of the ZX81 gaming legend.